So Tycoon just added a brand new Apache into the game, and I gotta admit, this thing is actually pretty OP. However, for the first time in history of doing these videos, I'm actually going to be saying that this vehicle is overpowered, yet it is balanced in its own way because it does have a lot of different mechanics which actually drag it up, but some of them actually drag it down. So anyway, I'll be going into that in today's video. Anyway, before we begin a damage test, I'd like to quickly cover the speed is going to be 190, which is pretty average, or the health is going to be below average, sitting at 700. So this is going to be one of the big counters to this vehicle. It's not going to be very durable. Anyway, let's move into a damage test. So firstly, I'd like to cover some of the disadvantages of this vehicle, and that's going to be its missiles against planes. Planes are going to be a pretty big counter for this Apache, and the reason why is because its damage isn't too high against planes. As you guys can clearly see, I was able to do only 16%, and this is a maxed out Apache versus maxed out F-35. So around 4 of these missiles will unfortunately not be very good against planes, where you're actually going to be forced to use your cannon a lot more. Anyway, let's move into the helis. So against something like the Super Hind, this is going to be a completely different story, because the missile damage against helicopters is going to be a lot higher, and due to the radar, which gives this vehicle a lot better overall lock-on range, and I'll be talking about that in just a second, this vehicle is able to do exactly 36% to a maxed out Super Hind, which is pretty insane. So 3 missiles will pretty much be able to defeat the Super Hind, which is pretty much the meta helicopter. So this thing will be definitely dominating the skies in terms of heli combat. Now moving into something a little bit different, that's going to be the tanks. How good is this thing actually going to be against the tanks? Because it says it has 16 missiles, which is supposed to be making it super OP in this regard. Yes, it is. However, it does have a few counters to it, because each individual missile isn't going to be doing too much damage. It's going to be averaging 7 to 8% per hit, meaning that this vehicle isn't going to be absolutely OP. Tanks will have their ways to counter it, because as you guys can see, he had to fire literally 14 missiles into me to be able to defeat me. And since most tanks average 3 to 4 APS charges plus smoke, let's just say at least 5 of these missiles on average are not going to be hitting, which is just going to be meaning that tanks will be able to survive the attacks. However, on average, this vehicle will just be able to shoot them down at a very high range. Now, the missiles isn't what always makes up for the vehicle's power. It's always going to be the cannon most of the time, and as you guys can see, it's going to be doing exactly 39 damage against planes. So this is some pretty high DPS. So the way in which you're going to be playing against planes with this vehicle is going to be shooting them with an average of 3 missiles, and then you're really going to have to finish them off with the cannon, which is just going to be making this vehicle a little bit more skilled. Now, the damage against helicopters is actually going to be 46. It's going to be a lot higher than what it was against the planes. However, once again, the missiles are already strong, so this cannon is really just going to be making it even more OP against helicopters. So from really what I'm looking at, this vehicle is decent against planes and OP against helis again. Now lastly, moving into the damage against tanks, the fire rate is going to be what's driving this vehicle a lot, because the individual damage is going to be averaging at around 2%. So you guys will probably have to learn how to lead your shots and hit them consistently to be doing good damage against tanks. However, the overall fire rate does make things a lot easier for you, so I'd say that this cannon is really powerful. Now moving on to the overall lock-on range against air vehicles, and it seems like it's going to be at around 2.2k stats, which pretty much matches the F-22 Raptor, which is pretty much the best plane in the game in terms of overall lock-on range. So it really does make sense for this vehicle to overall be really good in terms of this regard, because it does have a huge radar. This is basically what this is made for. But anyway, this vehicle is actually really strong. It does have its weaknesses of not having the most insane maneuverability out of many helicopters due to its speed and lower health, which is also not really the best. However, this vehicle will make up for its power in terms of overall range and being able to kill the enemies with brute force missiles. And now lastly, the bonus feature which makes this vehicle even better is just simply going to be its radar, which is going to be highlighting enemies at pretty long distances. It's going to be having a range of 1700 stats, and the range for losing the overall lock onto the enemy is going to be at 1800 stats. So always keep that in mind. Anyway, that is pretty much going to be everything I have for you guys in today's video. In conclusion, this vehicle is very strong. However, it does have its weaknesses, which really does make it balanced in my opinion. Anyway, see you guys next video. Have a great day, and I will probably be doing the Growler video either today or tomorrow, so stay notified just for that.